On Christmas night, my mother-in-law raised her glass and said, "I'm proud of every grandchild here except one." Her finger landed on my 5-year-old daughter. The room filled with nervous laughter. My daughter's eyes filled with tears. I stood up, and the celebration ended. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. The October wind carried the scent of burning leaves through the subdivision streets. Raina Collins stood at her kitchen window, watching her daughter Maya trace patterns in the condensation on the glass of the back door. The girl was 7 years old, small for her age, with Grant's dark hair and Raina's hazel eyes. She hummed while she drew, a tuneless, wandering melody that filled the quiet spaces of their home. Outside, the neighbors were raking leaves into neat piles. The Hendersons, the Pratts, the Johnsons with their golden retriever. Normal people living normal lives in this quiet corner of Waukesha, Wisconsin. The kind of place where everyone waved at each other and pretended not to notice when something was wrong. Raina dried her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the clock. 4:30. Grant would be home in an hour. His mother would arrive at 5 for dinner, the same way she did every other Thursday. Punctual, expected, inevitable. The pattern on the window glass caught the afternoon light. A child's attempt at a flower, all crooked petals and wishful stems. Maya pressed her palm against it, obliterating the design. "Mama, do I have to go to Grandma Evelyn's house this weekend?" Raina's hands stilled on the towel. She turned, studying her daughter's face. The girl wasn't looking at her. She was staring at her own reflection in the glass, her small shoulders hunched forward. "Your cousins will be there," Raina said carefully. "Don't you want to play with them?" Maya shrugged. The movement was too practiced, too rehearsed for a 7-year-old. "They don't really play with me anyway." There it was. The truth that had been building for months, maybe years. The truth Raina had been trying to ignore because acknowledging it meant confronting something uglier than she wanted to admit. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Maya turned, her eyes wide and serious. "Grandma Evelyn says I should play by myself. She says the other kids have their own games and I should find something quiet to do." Raina felt something cold settle in her chest. Not surprise. She'd seen it herself during family gatherings. But hearing it from Maya's mouth, spoken in that matter-of-fact voice children use when they've accepted something as normal, made it real in a way observation never could. She crossed the kitchen and knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with her daughter. "When did she say that?" "Last time. And the time before." Maya's fingers twisted in the hem of her shirt. "She tells Emma and Lucas they can go upstairs and play with the toys. But she tells me to stay in the living room and watch TV." The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Raina kept her voice calm, steady. "Did you tell Daddy?" Maya shook her head. "I don't want him to be sad." That was the moment Raina knew. Not suspected, not worried. Knew. This wasn't about a grandmother being distant or distracted. This was deliberate, calculated, and her daughter, her sweet, perceptive daughter, had already learned to protect her father from the truth. Evelyn Collins arrived at 5 o'clock exactly, carrying a store-bought apple pie and wearing her usual expression of polite disapproval. She was a handsome woman in her early 60s, the kind who colored her hair ash blonde and wore pressed slacks even on casual Thursdays. Her purse matched her shoes. Her lipstick never smudged. "The traffic on Moreland was terrible," she said as she stepped inside, handing the pie to Raina without looking at her. "Grant, you should have mentioned they're doing construction." Grant appeared from the hallway, loosening his tie. He kissed his mother's cheek. "I didn't know, Mom. Sorry about that." "Well, you should pay attention to these things." Evelyn's gaze swept the living room, cataloging, assessing. Her eyes landed on Maya, who stood near the stairs in her purple sweater and jeans. "Maya, Come, give your grandmother a proper greeting. Maya walked forward slowly. No running, no excitement. She stopped 3 feet away and said, "Hello, Grandma." "Hello." Evelyn didn't open her arms, didn't smile, just nodded, as if acknowledging the presence of a piece of furniture. Raina watched from the kitchen doorway. She watched Grant watch his mother and daughter, his expression uncertain. She watched the way Evelyn's attention immediately shifted to the framed photographs on the mantel, all recent additions, all featuring Grant's brother's children, Emma and Lucas, grinning at the camera during last summer's family reunion. No pictures of Maya. Evelyn had brought those frames herself 2 months ago. Raina had said nothing at the time, keeping peace, maintaining civility, all the things you're supposed to do with in-laws. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, Raina said. Her voice came out flat, controlled. Evelyn glanced at her briefly. "I'm sure it will be lovely." The dismissal was subtle but complete. Raina turned back to the kitchen, her hand steady as she checked the roast in the oven. The heat rolled out in a wave, warming her face. She closed the oven door with a soft click. Behind her, she heard Grant asking his mother about her bridge club, heard Evelyn's voice brighten as she described some triumph over another player. Animated, engaged, everything she wasn't when Maya was in the room. Raina pulled plates from the cabinet. White ceramic, a wedding gift from Grant's aunt. She'd always hated them, too formal, too fragile. She set them on the counter one by one, thinking about her daughter's hunched shoulders, thinking about the words she tells me to play by myself. The roast was perfect. The potatoes were crispy. The green beans had just the right amount of garlic. Raina served everything on those white plates and called everyone to the table. They sat in their usual seats. Grant at the head, Evelyn to his right, Raina across from her, Maya at the far end, closest to the kitchen. "This looks wonderful," Grant said, reaching for the serving spoon. "It does," Evelyn agreed. Then, almost as an afterthought, "Though I hope the roast isn't too rare. You know how I am about that." Raina had cooked it medium well. She always did. "I think you'll find it's fine." They ate. Grant asked about the construction on Moorland. Evelyn described her neighbor's new fence. Normal conversation, punctuated by the clink of silverware and the occasional request to pass the salt. Maya ate quietly, cutting her meat into small, precise pieces. "So how's school, Maya?" Grant asked. "Good," Maya said softly. "Just good." He smiled at her. "What did you learn this week?" "We're doing multiplication." "That's advanced for 2nd grade. You must be doing well." Maya nodded, a small movement. Evelyn dabbed her mouth with her napkin. "Emma is doing very well in school too. All A's on her last report card. And Lucas won the spelling bee in his class." Grant nodded. "That's great. They're good kids." "They are." Evelyn's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "Very bright, very well behaved." Raina set down her fork carefully. "Maya got Student of the Month in October." Silence, brief but noticeable. "How nice," Evelyn said without inflection. Grant shifted in his seat. "That's wonderful, sweetie. I'm proud of you." Maya didn't respond. She was staring at her plate, moving a piece of potato back and forth with her fork. The meal continued. Evelyn mentioned that Emma was taking ballet lessons, that Lucas had joined the soccer team, that both children were so photogenic, so easy to capture on camera. "I should take more pictures of all the grandchildren," she said, looking directly at Grant. "When they're together, so they remember these times." Together. The word hung in the air. Raina thought about those frames on the mantel, about the shelf in Evelyn's living room, lined with photos of Emma and Lucas at various ages. School pictures, holiday portraits, candid shots from birthday parties. She'd been to Evelyn's house a dozen times. She'd never seen a single photograph of Maya. After dinner, Evelyn declined coffee. She had an early morning appointment, she said. Bridge club business. She kissed Grant goodbye, nodded at Raina, and paused briefly in front of Maya. You should smile more, she told the girl. Children should be cheerful. Then she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and the apple pie, still untouched on the counter. Grant cleared the table while Raina loaded the dishwasher. Maya had gone upstairs to her room without being asked. Mom seemed tired tonight, Grant said. Raina rinsed a plate, watching the water spiral down the drain. Did she? You okay? Fine. She handed him the plate. Grant, does your mother ever talk about Maya? When you see her alone? He stacked the plate in the dishwasher, not looking at her. Talk about her how? At all. A pause, the kind that lasted half a second too long. She asks how she's doing. Does she? It wasn't a question. Grant straightened, wiping his hands on a towel. What's this about? Raina closed the dishwasher and turned to face him. Maya told me something today. About the sleepovers at your mother's house. What did she say? That Evelyn separates her from Emma and Lucas. Tells her to play alone while the other kids go upstairs together. Grant's expression shifted. Surprise, then something that looked like reluctant recognition. I'm sure it's not. I mean, maybe Maya misunderstood. She didn't misunderstand. Raina. Look at the mantel, Grant. She gestured toward the living room. Your mother brought those frames 2 months ago. 3 pictures. None of them include our daughter. He followed her gaze. She watched him count the frames, watched realization settle across his features. I'll talk to her, he said quietly. When? Soon. I'll figure out what to say. Raina studied her husband. He was a good man. Steady. Reliable. He loved his daughter, but he also loved his mother. And the space between those two loves was where the truth got lost. Okay, she said. Because what else could she say? Talk to her. But even as she spoke, Raina knew nothing would change. Evelyn had made her position clear through 1,000 small cuts, 1,000 deliberate omissions. This wasn't about misunderstanding or miscommunication. This was about something deeper, something uglier, and it was getting worse. 2 weeks later, Raina stood in the checkout line at the grocery store, watching the cashier scan her items. Bread, milk, pasta, the mundane architecture of daily life. Raina. She turned. Jessica Pratt, her neighbor from 2 streets over. They knew each other enough to wave, to exchange pleasantries about weather and lawn maintenance. Hi, Jessica. I've been meaning to ask. Jessica glanced around, then lowered her voice. Is everything okay with your family? Raina's hands tightened on the shopping cart. What do you mean? It's just, someone called me last week. They said they were doing a reference check for you, for a job application or something. Jessica's expression was genuinely confused, but they were asking really strange questions. About your marriage, about when Grant travels for work, about whether I'd ever seen anyone at your house during the day. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The cashier kept scanning items. Beep, 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 an artificial rhythm that suddenly sounded very loud. I haven't applied for any jobs, Raina said slowly. That's what I thought. Jessica shifted her own shopping basket. I told them I didn't feel comfortable answering those questions and hung up. But it was weird, you know. They seemed really interested in your personal life. Did they give a name? A company? No, it was a woman. She said she was calling from a verification service. Jessica touched Raina's arm. I'm sorry if I'm overstepping. I just thought you should know. No, I thank you. Really. Jessica nodded and moved toward another checkout line. Raina paid for her groceries on autopilot, her mind cycling through possibilities. A wrong number, a scam, an identity theft attempt. But the questions Jessica described weren't about credit cards or social security numbers. They were about fidelity, about opportunity, about whether Raina Collins could have cheated on her husband. She loaded the groceries into her car, started the engine, and sat there with her hands on the steering wheel. The parking lot stretched out before her. Ordinary cars, ordinary people, an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Nothing felt ordinary anymore. When she got home, Grant's car was already in the driveway. He wasn't supposed to be back until evening. She found him in the kitchen, his jacket still on, his expression carefully neutral. "We need to talk," he said. Raina set the grocery bags on the counter. "About what?" "My mother called me at work." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as stress. "She wants us to come over this weekend. All of us. She says there's something important we need to discuss." "What kind of something?" She wouldn't say, but he met her eyes. "Raina, she asked me about your job, about your schedule, about how often you're home alone." There it was, the connection, the pattern. "Someone called our neighbor," Raina said quietly, pretending to do a reference check, asking invasive questions about our marriage. Grant stared at her. "What?" "Jessica Pratt, 2 streets over. She said someone wanted to know about my personal life, about when you travel, about who visits the house." "That doesn't make any sense." "Doesn't it?" Raina moved closer to him, her voice still calm, still controlled. "Your mother treats Maya differently than your brother's kids. She never has pictures of her. She separates her at family gatherings. And now someone is investigating whether I've been faithful to you. You think my mother—" "I don't think, Grant. I know." He shook his head, but the certainty in the gesture was already cracking. "That's insane. Why would she do that?" Raina watched her husband struggle with a truth he'd probably sensed but never acknowledged. She could see the moment he started to accept it, the way his shoulders dropped, the way his jaw tightened. "You know why," she said softly. "You've always known." Grant sank into a kitchen chair. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "She doesn't think Maya looks like me." "I know. She said it before. Little comments. I always brush them off." "I know," Raina repeated. "God." He covered his face with his hands. "This is insane." Raina stood very still, watching her husband process what she'd understood for years. The groceries sat forgotten on the counter. Ice cream slowly melting. Frozen vegetables defrosting. "We're not going this weekend," Grant said finally, looking up at her. "I'll call her and cancel." "No." He blinked. "What?" "We're going." Raina pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "I want to hear what she has to say." "Raina." "I want her to say it out loud, Grant. Whatever she's thinking, whatever she's done, I want her to own it." Her voice was perfectly level. No anger, no tears, just cold, crystalline certainty. Grant studied her face, and something in her expression made him nod slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay." That night, after Maya was asleep and Grant was in the shower, Raina sat at the computer in their small home office. She opened a blank document and began typing. Date, time, what Jessica had said, the exact words Evelyn had used about Maya over the years, the separation at family gatherings, the missing photographs, the cold greetings, documentation, evidence, facts. Because Raina had learned something important in her 32 years. When someone showed you who they were, you believed them. And when they tried to destroy you, you didn't fight back with emotion. You fought back with proof. The drive to Evelyn's house took 40 minutes. Grant drove in silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Maya sat in the back seat reading a library book about horses. Raina watched the autumn landscape roll past. Bare trees, gray sky, the kind of November afternoon that felt like waiting. Evelyn lived in a larger subdivision than theirs, with houses set back from the street and careful landscaping. Professional, prosperous, The kind of neighborhood where everyone belonged to the same country club and voted the same way. Her house was a colonial with white shutters and a perfectly maintained lawn. Grant's father had died 10 years ago, leaving Evelyn comfortable and solitary in this 4-bedroom monument to middle-class success. They parked in the circular driveway. Maya closed her book reluctantly. "Do I have to come inside?" she asked. Raina turned in her seat. "Yes, honey, but we won't stay long." The girl nodded, that same resigned acceptance in her posture. Evelyn answered the door wearing pressed slacks and a cashmere sweater. Her living room was exactly as Raina remembered. Beige furniture, cream carpet, everything coordinated and spotless. And there, on the shelves flanking the fireplace, were the photographs. Dozens of them. Emma at the beach. Lucas on a bicycle. Both children opening Christmas presents. Both children blowing out birthday candles. A professional portrait of Evelyn with both grandchildren. All 3 of them smiling at the camera. Not a single image of Maya. "Come in," Evelyn said. "Sit down. Maya, you can watch TV in the den." "She'll stay with us," Raina said. Evelyn's expression tightened. "I thought we could talk adult to adult. She's 7 years old. She can color at the table." Something passed between them, a test of wills compressed into 3 seconds. Evelyn looked away first. "Fine. There's paper and crayons in the drawer by the window." Maya got her supplies and settled at the dining table, far enough away to seem separate, but close enough to hear everything. Raina approved. Let her daughter see this. Let her understand that some battles had to be fought. They sat, Evelyn in her usual armchair, Grant and Raina on the sofa. The afternoon light came through the windows at an angle, highlighting dust motes floating in the air. "I asked you here because we have a family matter to discuss," Evelyn began. She looked at Grant, not Raina. "A sensitive matter." "What kind of matter?" Grant's voice was careful. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. "I've been concerned for some time about irregularities in your household." Raina felt Grant stiffen beside her. She kept her own face blank, waiting. "What irregularities?" Grant asked. "Your daughter." Evelyn said it simply, as if commenting on the weather. "She doesn't resemble you, Grant. Not in the slightest." Silence. In the dining room, Maya's crayon stopped moving across the paper. "Mom." "I'm not accusing anyone of anything deliberate," Evelyn continued, her tone reasonable, almost gentle. "But these things happen. People make mistakes. And I think, for everyone's sake, we need to establish the truth." Raina spoke for the first time since sitting down. "What truth would that be, Evelyn?" The older woman's gaze shifted to her. Cold, appraising. "You were alone frequently when Grant traveled for work, especially during your pregnancy. That's a documented fact." "Documented by whom?" "By anyone who was paying attention." Evelyn's voice remained calm. "I'm simply saying that physical resemblance is important. And when a child looks nothing like her supposed father, questions arise naturally." Grant stood up abruptly. "This is insane. Maya is my daughter." "Then you won't mind proving it." The words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Raina watched the ripples spread across Grant's face. Shock, hurt, anger, and underneath it all, a terrible uncertainty. That uncertainty was Evelyn's victory. Not the accusation itself, but the doubt she'd planted, the question she'd made legitimate simply by speaking it aloud. "You want a DNA test," Grant said flatly. "I want the truth." Evelyn stood as well, meeting her son's eyes. "I want this family to be built on honesty. Is that so unreasonable?" Raina remained seated, her hands folded in her lap. She could feel Maya watching from the dining table, could feel her daughter's anxiety radiating across the room. "No," Raina said quietly. Both Grant and Evelyn turned to look at her. "It's not unreasonable at all," Raina continued. "Let's do the test. Let's establish, once and for all, exactly who Maya's father is. Raina, Grant began. She stood, moving to stand beside her husband. I have nothing to hide. If Evelyn wants proof, she'll get it. Schedule the test, Grant. Tomorrow, if possible. Evelyn's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been surprise. She'd expected resistance, defensiveness, tears. She got an agreement instead. Well, Evelyn said, recovering, I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. I'm being transparent, Raina corrected. There's a difference. They left shortly after. Maya was silent in the car. Grant was silent too, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Raina stared out the window and thought about documentation, about evidence, about the careful construction of a case. Evelyn had made her accusation official now, public within the family. Once the DNA test came back, and Raina had no doubt what it would show, Evelyn would have to face the consequences of being wrong. Or rather, she would have to choose whether to apologize. Raina was betting she wouldn't, and that choice would tell them everything they needed to know. The DNA test took 3 days to process. A simple cheek swab for Grant and Maya, sent to a lab in Milwaukee. Clinical, impersonal, reducing years of marriage and 7 years of parenthood to a sequence of genetic markers. During those 3 days, Raina documented everything. She wrote down dates and conversations. She screenshotted text messages from Evelyn, brief, cold messages that never mentioned Maya by name, always referring to the child or your daughter in a way that created distance. She also called Jessica Pratt and asked if she'd be willing to write down what had happened during that strange phone call. Jessica agreed immediately, disturbed by the whole situation. On the 4th day, the results arrived by email. Grant opened them at the kitchen table, Raina standing behind him, reading over his shoulder. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Grant was definitively, scientifically, inarguably Maya's father. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called his mother. The results came back, he said without preamble. I'm Maya's father, obviously. Raina couldn't hear Evelyn's response, but she watched Grant's jaw tighten. No, Mom, you don't get to just brush this off. You accused my wife of cheating. You hired someone to investigate her. He stopped, listened. Raina saw the exact moment his expression changed from anger to disbelief. What do you mean you don't trust the results? His voice rose. It's a certified DNA test. More silence. Grant's free hand curled into a fist on the table. That's not. Mom, that doesn't make any sense. He rubbed his eyes. No, we're not doing another test. This is over. He ended the call and sat very still, staring at nothing. She doesn't believe it, he said finally. She says labs make mistakes. She wants us to use a different facility. Raina had expected this. Of course she'd expected this. People like Evelyn didn't admit they were wrong. They moved goalposts. They invented new requirements. They protected their version of reality at all costs. What else did she say? Raina asked. That she still doesn't trust you. That the child, he stopped himself. That Maya shouldn't be kept away from her grandmother. Kept away. Her words. Raina pulled out a chair and sat down. She felt very calm, detached, like she was watching this happen to someone else. She's going to escalate, Raina said. What? She's going to escalate. The test didn't give her what she wanted, so she'll find another way to maintain control. Raina met his eyes. You know I'm right. Grant looked at the test results, still glowing on the computer screen. What do you want to do? I want to protect our daughter, and I want to make sure Evelyn can never do this again. How? By being ready, Raina said simply. By documenting everything. By making sure that if she tries anything else, we have proof of every single thing she's done. Grant nodded slowly. He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, solid. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have stopped this years ago." "Yes," Raina agreed. "You should have." But they were both stopping it now. Together. 2 weeks passed. Evelyn didn't call, didn't text. The silence felt ominous, like the stillness before a storm. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late November, a man in a sedan parked across the street from their house. Raina noticed him while taking out the trash. He sat there for 20 minutes, occasionally writing in a notebook. When she came back outside with Maya to drive her to school, he pulled away. The next day he was back. Raina drove Maya to school, came home, and went straight to her computer. She opened the file where she'd been keeping notes and added a new entry. Unknown vehicle. Male driver. License plate. She'd memorized it that morning. Then she called Grant at work. "Someone's watching the house," she said. "What?" "A man in a dark blue sedan. He's been here 2 mornings in a row." "Did you call the police?" "Not yet. I wanted to confirm it wasn't just paranoia." But it wasn't paranoia. The car appeared again that afternoon. And the next morning. Always the same vehicle. Always the same pattern. On Friday, Raina walked directly up to the car before he could drive away. She tapped on the window. The man inside looked to be in his 50s, professionally dressed, with thinning hair and a wedding ring. He rolled down the window halfway. "Can I help you?" he asked. "You can explain why you're parked outside my house," Raina said evenly. "I'm not." "You've been here 4 times this week. Same car, same time. If you're selling something, I'm not interested. If you're lost by a GPS otherwise, I'm calling the police." The man hesitated. Then he reached into the passenger seat and pulled out a business card. "I'm a private investigator. I was hired to do a routine background check." Raina took the card. Professional letterhead. A local firm. A background check on whom? "I'm not at liberty to." "On me," Raina finished. She studied his face. "Who hired you?" "I can't disclose client information." "You don't have to. I already know." She photographed his license plate with her phone, photographed his face through the window, and photographed the business card. He watched her do it, his expression caught between professional detachment and mild alarm. "Tell your client," Raina said clearly, "that if this harassment continues, I'll be contacting my attorney, and I'll be requesting all records of this investigation as evidence in a legal proceeding." She walked back to her house without waiting for a response. The sedan pulled away 30 seconds later. Inside, Raina's hands were shaking. She sat at the kitchen table and waited for the trembling to stop. Then she opened her laptop and sent an email to herself with the photos attached. Subject line: Documentation 11/19. When Grant came home that evening, she showed him everything. The business card, the photographs, the notes she'd been keeping. "She hired an investigator," Grant said slowly. "My mother actually hired someone to follow you." "Yes." "Jesus Christ." He dropped into a chair, running both hands through his hair. I don't even know what this is." "It's obsession," Raina said. "It's someone who can't accept being wrong, so she's trying to find any evidence to prove she was right." "What do we do?" Raina had been thinking about this question for days. "We wait. We document everything. And when she makes her next move, because she will, we'll be ready." "What if she doesn't make another move?" "She will," Raina said with certainty. "People like Evelyn don't stop. They double down." She was right. 3 weeks later, 2 days before Christmas, a courier arrived at their door with a legal document. Petition for grandparent visitation rights. Evelyn Collins versus Grant and Raina Collins. The lawsuit claimed that Raina had deliberately alienated Maya from her loving grandmother, that she had denied reasonable contact, that she had poisoned the relationship through false allegations and hostile behavior. It requested court-mandated visitation, regular access, legal enforcement. Grant read it twice, his face going pale. "She's suing us." Raina took the document from his hands and read it herself. The language was formal, carefully constructed. Evelyn had hired a good attorney, someone who knew how to frame the narrative. But reading between the legal phrasing, Raina could see the truth. This wasn't about Maya's well-being. It wasn't about grandparent rights or family relationships. This was about control. Evelyn had lost control of the narrative when the DNA test came back. She'd lost control when Raina confronted the investigator. So now she was using the only weapon she had left, the legal system. "We need a lawyer," Grant said. "Yes," Raina agreed. "We do." She set the document on the kitchen counter, her mind already working through possibilities, evidence, witnesses, documentation. For years, she'd been collecting proof without fully understanding why. Now she knew. This was why. The law office of Patricia Brennan occupied the third floor of a renovated building in downtown Waukesha. Raina and Grant sat across from her in a conference room with a view of the courthouse 2 blocks away. It was early January, the first week of the new year. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals. Patricia Brennan was in her mid-50s, with gray-streaked hair and the kind of face that had seen too many family disputes to be shocked by anything. She'd reviewed Evelyn's petition before this meeting, and now she sat with her hands folded on the table, studying them both. "Tell me everything," she said. So they did. Grant went first, describing his mother's behavior toward Maya, the comments about resemblance, the separate treatment during family gatherings, the DNA test. His voice was steady but strained, a man confronting truths he'd spent years avoiding. Then Raina spoke. She was more detailed, more precise. She described specific incidents with dates and times. She mentioned the investigator, the strange phone calls to neighbors, the missing photographs, the deliberate emotional distance. Patricia took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When they finished, she set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Wisconsin does recognize grandparent visitation rights under certain circumstances," she said. "But the bar is high. The grandparent has to prove that visitation serves the child's best interests and that denying it would harm the child." "Would harm her?" Grant's voice rose slightly. "My mother is the one causing harm." "Can you prove that?" Silence. Patricia looked at Raina. "You mentioned documentation. What exactly do you have?" Raina had brought everything. She opened her folder and spread it across the conference table. Text messages, email exchanges, the business card from the private investigator with her notes about his surveillance, the photos of his car, his license plate, Jessica Pratt's written statement about the reference check phone call, school counselor notes about Maya's increased anxiety. Patricia examined each piece methodically. Minutes passed. The snow continued falling outside. "This is good," Patricia said finally. "This is very good. But we need more than documentation of bad behavior. We need to demonstrate that your mother-in-law's involvement in Maya's life has been actively harmful and that continuing contact would damage the child's well-being." "How do we do that?" Raina asked. "We tell the truth. Comprehensively." Patricia pulled out a legal pad. "I need you to write down every incident you can remember. Every comment, every exclusion, every moment when Maya was treated differently than the other grandchildren. I need dates if you have them. Witnesses if possible. We're building a timeline of psychological harm." Grant looked at Raina. "Can you do that?" "I've already started," Raina said. Over the next 2 weeks, Raina constructed a detailed history. She interviewed Maya's teacher, who confirmed the child had mentioned feeling excluded during family visits. She spoke with Grant's brother, who reluctantly admitted he'd noticed their mother's coldness toward Maya. She even got a statement from the daycare center where Maya had attended preschool, noting that Evelyn had never visited or attended any events, despite doing so regularly for Emma and Lucas. Each piece of evidence was dated, verified, and added to the file. Patricia reviewed everything and nodded with grim satisfaction. "This makes the case. Your mother-in-law has systematically excluded and emotionally neglected this child while maintaining relationships with other grandchildren. That's not love. That's the opposite. The court date was set for late February, 6 weeks away. During those weeks, Evelyn called Grant repeatedly. She left voicemails, some pleading, some accusatory. She sent emails claiming she was being unfairly persecuted. She told other family members that Raina was keeping Maya from her, painting herself as the victim. Grant stopped responding after the third call. Raina had never responded at all. Maya, meanwhile, seemed lighter, more relaxed. She'd stopped asking about visiting Grandma Evelyn's house, stopped watching the door anxiously during family dinners. The counselor noted improvement in her mood at school. Raina documented all of it. The night before the court hearing, Raina sat at the kitchen table reviewing their evidence one final time. Everything was organized chronologically in a binder. Texts, emails, witness statements, photos, professional observations. Grant found her there after putting Maya to bed. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "No." Raina closed the binder. "I'm ready. She's going to fight this hard. You know that, right? My mother doesn't lose gracefully." "Neither do I." Grant pulled out a chair and sat beside her. "I keep thinking about all the times I should have intervened. All the times I saw what was happening and convinced myself it wasn't that bad. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it?" He met her eyes. "I chose to keep the peace instead of protecting my daughter. That's on me." Raina didn't argue. He was right. They both knew it. "We're protecting her now," Raina said instead. "That's what matters." The courthouse was smaller than Raina had expected, less grand. Just another municipal building with tile floors and fluorescent lights, and people moving through doorways with armloads of files. They arrived 20 minutes early. Patricia met them in the hallway, professional in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive and well-used. "Remember," she said, quietly, "stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't elaborate unless asked. And don't let emotion overwhelm facts." Raina nodded. She wasn't worried about staying calm. She'd been calm for months. Years, really. Collecting evidence, while everyone else swirled with feelings. Evelyn arrived with her attorney 5 minutes later. Her lawyer was a man in his 40s with carefully styled hair and an aggressive handshake. Evelyn herself wore a tasteful navy dress and pearls. She looked like someone's beloved grandmother. Respectable. Concerned. She didn't look at Raina or Grant. Not once. The courtroom was utilitarian, wood paneling, neutral carpet, a judge's bench elevated above the rest. A few other people sat in the gallery, waiting for their own cases. The whole setting felt anticlimactic, too ordinary for what was being decided here. Judge Marian Kowalski was a black woman in her early 60s with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She reviewed the case file while they all settled into their seats, her expression giving nothing away. "This is a petition for grandparent visitation," she said without preamble. "Ms. Collins, you're seeking court-ordered access to your granddaughter Maya. Is that correct?" Evelyn's attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My client has been unjustly denied contact with her grandchild despite repeated attempts to maintain a loving relationship. And the parents oppose this petition?" Patricia stood. "Yes, Your Honor. The respondents oppose the petition on the grounds that the petitioner has demonstrated a pattern of emotional neglect and psychological harm toward the minor child, making court-ordered visitation contrary to the child's best interests." Judge Kowalski looked over her glasses at both attorneys. "I've read the filings. Let's hear testimony. Ms. Collins, you may proceed." Evelyn took the stand. She was sworn in, settled into the witness chair, and began her narrative under her attorney's guidance. She described herself as a devoted grandmother, loving, attentive, desperate to be part of her granddaughter's life. She spoke about the joy she felt with Emma and Lucas, the activities they did together, the bond they shared. And I wanted that same relationship with Maya, she said, her voice wavering slightly. But her mother made it impossible. Can you explain what you mean by impossible? Her attorney asked. Reina always had an excuse. Maya was tired. Maya was busy. Maya didn't want to come over. Evelyn dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I tried so hard to include her, but I was constantly blocked. It was masterful, emotional without being overwrought, convincing in its details. Then Patricia stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Collins, how many photographs of Maya do you display in your home? Evelyn blinked. I'm sorry. Photographs of your granddaughter Maya. How many do you have displayed where visitors can see them? A pause. I'm not sure exactly. Would you say more than 5? Perhaps. Patricia consulted her notes. The respondents have submitted photographs of your home showing 12 framed pictures of Emma and Lucas. Can you point to a single photograph of Maya among them? Evelyn's attorney objected. Relevance, Your Honor. I'm establishing a pattern of differential treatment, Patricia said calmly. It goes to the heart of whether this petitioner has demonstrated a meaningful relationship with the child. Overruled, Judge Kowalski said. Answer the question, Mrs. Collins. Evelyn's composure cracked slightly. I may not have recent photos displayed, but... Any photos? Patricia pressed. From any time in Maya's life. I know. Not currently displayed. Patricia moved on before Evelyn could recover. You requested a DNA test to establish paternity of Maya. Is that correct? I had concerns about... Yes or no, please. Yes. And when the test confirmed your son was the father, did you apologize to the respondents for falsely accusing the mother of adultery? I didn't accuse anyone. You hired a private investigator to surveil Reina Collins. Yes or no? Evelyn's attorney stood. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. Withdrawn. Patricia turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence of the private investigation, including photographs and business records from the firm that was hired. She handed over the documentation, the investigator's business card, the photos Reina had taken, a statement from the investigation firm confirming they'd been retained to conduct surveillance on Reina Collins, paid for by Evelyn Collins. Judge Kowalski examined the materials without expression. Patricia continued, Mrs. Collins, during family gatherings, did you treat Maya differently than Emma and Lucas? I treated all my grandchildren with love. Did you ever separate Maya from the other children during playtime? They have different interests. Did you tell Maya to play alone while Emma and Lucas played together upstairs? A longer pause. Evelyn glanced at her attorney. Occasionally, if the other children wanted private time. So, yes, you did separate her. Not deliberately. But it happened. Regularly. I don't recall. Patricia pulled out another document. I have a statement from Maya's school counselor noting that the child reported feeling excluded during grandmother visits. Would you like me to read it into the record? Evelyn's face had gone pale. That's not fair. You're twisting everything. I'm presenting facts, Mrs. Collins. Patricia's voice remained perfectly even. Facts that demonstrate you never wanted a relationship with Maya. You wanted to prove she wasn't your son's child. And when that failed, you filed this lawsuit as a way to maintain control over a family that had finally decided to protect their daughter from your treatment. That's not true. Then explain the investigator. Explain the missing photographs. Explain telling a 7-year-old child to play alone while her cousins have fun together. Evelyn had no answer. She sat in the witness chair, her careful composure completely shattered, unable to defend the indefensible. Judge Kowalski called a 15-minute recess. In the hallway, Grant leaned against the wall, looking drained. I can't believe she actually tried to make herself the victim. People like your mother always do, Patricia said. They genuinely believe their own narrative. But facts don't care about narratives. When they reconvened, Patricia called Raina to the stand. Raina answered every question with precise clarity. Yes, she had limited contact between Evelyn and Maya. No, it wasn't to be vindictive. It was to protect her daughter from emotional harm. She described specific incidents. Dates, times, exact words spoken. She remained composed throughout, her voice never rising, never breaking. Evelyn's attorney tried to rattle her during cross-examination. Isn't it true, Mrs. Collins, that you've always resented your mother-in-law? No. Isn't it true that you've been looking for an excuse to cut her out of your family's life? No. I've been trying to protect my daughter from someone who treats her as less than human. That's a dramatic accusation. It's an accurate one. The attorney frowned. You've documented every minor slight, every perceived insult. Doesn't that seem excessive? It seems necessary, Raina said evenly. When someone is systematically damaging your child's self-worth, documentation isn't excessive. It's evidence. The attorney had no effective response. Judge Kowalski called Maya's school counselor next, then Grant's brother, who reluctantly confirmed the differential treatment, then Jessica Pratt, who described the invasive phone call. Piece by piece, Patricia constructed an irrefutable picture of deliberate, sustained emotional neglect. Finally, Judge Kowalski called both attorneys to the bench for a brief conference. Raina couldn't hear what was said, but she watched the judge's expression, professional, controlled, but with a tightness around her mouth that suggested she'd seen enough. When they returned to their seats, Judge Kowalski removed her glasses and looked directly at Evelyn. Mrs. Collins, I've reviewed all the evidence presented today. The court recognizes that grandparents can play an important role in children's lives. However, that role must be beneficial to the child, not harmful. Evelyn sat very still. The evidence presented demonstrates a pattern of exclusionary behavior, emotional neglect, and differential treatment that has caused documented psychological distress to the minor child. Your actions, including hiring an investigator to surveil the child's mother and demanding a DNA test without reasonable cause, demonstrate that your interest is not in the child's well-being, but in exercising control over your son's family. The judge put her glasses back on. The petition for grandparent visitation is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering that there be no contact between the petitioner and the minor child without explicit consent from both parents. Any violation of this order may result in contempt charges. She struck her gavel once. We're adjourned. The courtroom was silent for 3 full seconds. Then Evelyn's attorney was gathering his papers, his expression tight with professional frustration. Evelyn herself sat frozen in her seat, staring straight ahead. Patricia touched Raina's arm. Let's go. They left through the side door, avoiding Evelyn entirely. Outside, the February air was cold and clean. Snow had started falling again, light flurries that caught in Raina's hair. Grant stopped on the courthouse steps, breathing like he'd been running. It's over. It's over, Raina confirmed. They drove home in silence. When they arrived, Maya's babysitter was waiting with the girl, who'd spent the day at a friend's house. Carefully kept away from all of this, Maya looked up when they entered, her eyes wide and uncertain. How did it go? She asked. Grant knelt down in front of her. It went well, sweetheart. You don't have to worry about visiting Grandma Evelyn anymore. Ever. Not unless you want to. And that's your choice. Maya considered this. Then, slowly, her shoulders relaxed. Okay. That night, after Maya was asleep, Raina stood in the kitchen looking at the refrigerator. There was a drawing there, magnetic alphabet letters holding it in place. Maya had made it last week, a picture of their family. 3 stick figures, holding hands under a crooked sun. Just 3. Grant appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for all of it, for not seeing what was happening, for not protecting you both sooner." Reina leaned back against him. "You saw it eventually. Too late. But not never." They stood there in the dim kitchen, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. Outside, the neighborhood was dark and quiet. Normal houses with normal families, each carrying their own weight of secrets and struggles. Reina thought about Evelyn, probably sitting alone in her perfect house with her perfect photographs of the grandchildren she preferred. She wondered if the woman felt any remorse, any recognition of what she'd done. Probably not. People like Evelyn rarely did. But it didn't matter anymore. Evelyn had lost, not through dramatic confrontation or emotional catharsis, but through the simple, undeniable weight of documented facts presented in a courtroom by a woman who'd refused to be destroyed. Reina had protected her daughter. She had won legally, and she had proven one quiet truth that she'd always known. When a mother is pushed far enough, she doesn't explode. She doesn't collapse. She doesn't forgive. She ends it properly. 3 months passed. Spring came to Wisconsin with its usual tentative optimism. Crocuses pushing through half-frozen ground, trees budding in careful increments, the slow return of green to a landscape that had been gray for too long. Reina stood at the kitchen sink, washing dinner dishes, while Maya did homework at the table. The evening light came through the windows at a gentle angle, warming everything it touched. "Mama, how do you spell butterfly?" Maya asked. "Sound it out first," Reina said, rinsing a plate. She heard Maya muttering to herself, testing letter combinations. A year ago, the girl would have asked 3 times, uncertain, seeking constant reassurance. Now she worked through problems herself, confident in her own capabilities. The court order had done that. Or rather, the absence of Evelyn had done that. Grant came home at 6, loosening his tie in the doorway. He'd gotten a promotion last month. More responsibility, better pay, a recognition that he'd been angling for years to receive. He smiled when he saw them both. "How was everyone's day?" "Good," Maya said without looking up from her homework. "I got 100 on my spelling test." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Reina dried her hands and moved to help Grant with dinner preparations. They had a rhythm now, an easy synchronization of domestic tasks that felt earned rather than assumed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Brennan. "FYI, Evelyn's attorney filed a motion to reconsider the visitation ruling. Judge denied it this morning. You're officially done." Reina showed Grant the message. She tried again. He frowned. "After everything." "Some people never stop trying," Reina said. But she felt no anger about it, no frustration, just a distant sense of recognition that Evelyn would likely spend the rest of her life convinced she'd been wronged, that the world had conspired against her, that she was the true victim in this situation. Let her believe it. Belief didn't change reality. That weekend they drove to the park. The same park where, 2 years ago, Reina had watched Maya play alone at a family picnic while Emma and Lucas ran freely, cheered on by their doting grandmother. She remembered standing by the pavilion, holding a paper plate of potato salad, watching her daughter try to insert herself into games that always seemed to exclude her. Today, Maya ran to the swings without hesitation. No anxiety, no checking back to see if she was allowed. Just a child being a child, claiming her space in the world. Grant pushed her on the swings while Reina sat on a nearby bench watching. The park was full of families, parents with strollers, teenagers playing frisbee, an elderly couple walking a small white dog. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, each carrying their own invisible weights. A woman sat down on the other end of Reina's bench, mid-40s, tired-looking, with a coffee cup from the shop across the street. "Your daughter?" she asked, nodding toward Maya. "Yes." "She looks happy." Reina watched Maya laugh as Grant pushed her higher. "She is." The woman, sipped her coffee. I'm going through a custody thing right now. My ex's mother thinks she should have a say in how we raise our kids. She laughed bitterly. Grandparents, you know, they think they have rights. Raina turned to look at her, saw the exhaustion, the frustration, the same worn-down feeling she'd carried for years before finally deciding to fight back. Document everything, Raina said quietly. What? Every incident, every inappropriate comment, every time she undermines you or treats your kids badly. Write it down with dates and times. Get witnesses if you can. Keep it organized. Raina pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, showing the woman the template she'd created. The courts care about patterns, not isolated incidents. Show them the pattern. The woman stared at the phone screen, then at Raina. Did you go through something similar? Yes. How did it turn out? I won, Raina said simply, because I had proof. They exchanged numbers. The woman thanked her 3 times before leaving. Raina watched her go, then turned her attention back to her daughter, still swinging, still laughing, the afternoon sun catching in her dark hair. That night, after Maya was asleep, Raina sat in the home office updating the household budget. Boring, necessary work. The kind of task that grounded her in the practical reality of their lives. Grant appeared in the doorway with 2 glasses of wine. Thought you might want company, he said. She accepted the glass and made room for him in the chair. They sat together in comfortable silence, the only light coming from the desk lamp. I talked to my brother today, Grant said eventually. He asked how we were doing. What did you tell him? The truth. That we're good. That Maya's thriving. That we made the right choice. He paused. He said Mom's been calling him, trying to get him to convince us to reconsider. And he told her no. Told her she needs to accept the court's decision and move on. Raina sipped her wine. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. Hung up on him. Grant shook his head. I keep waiting to feel guilty about all this, about cutting her off, but I don't. Why would you feel guilty about protecting your child? Because she's my mother. And Maya is your daughter. There's no contest there. Grant was quiet for a moment. Then, do you think she'll ever change? Ever realize what she did wrong? No, Raina said honestly. People like Evelyn don't change. They double down. They rewrite history, so they're always the hero of their own story. That's depressing. It's realistic. They finished their wine in silence. Later, lying in bed with Grant already asleep beside her, Raina thought about change, about whether people could really transform themselves, or whether they just revealed more clearly who they'd always been. She thought about Evelyn, alone in her perfect house, surrounded by photographs of the grandchildren she preferred. She thought about the DNA test, the investigator, the lawsuit, all that energy expended trying to prove something that was never true. And she thought about Maya, sleeping peacefully down the hall, no longer carrying the weight of someone else's rejection. That was change, real change, not in the person causing harm, but in removing them from the equation entirely. Raina closed her eyes and slept without dreams. The summer brought heat and humidity, the kind of weather that made Wisconsin feel like a different state entirely. Raina worked in the garden while Maya played with the sprinkler, shrieking with laughter every time the water arc caught her. Grant's brother visited with his family in July. Emma and Lucas were polite, well-behaved children who played nicely with Maya now that Evelyn wasn't there to enforce invisible hierarchies. They built a fort in the backyard, all 3 of them working together, and for the first time, Raina saw Maya as an equal participant rather than a tolerated outsider. She seems different, Grant's brother said quietly, watching the children. He and Raina stood on the deck, cold drinks sweating in the heat. She is different, Raina agreed. I should have said something before about how Mom treated her. Yes, Raina said. You should have. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. I'm sorry. Tell Maya, not me. He did later in his own awkward way. Maya accepted his apology with the easy forgiveness of children, then went back to playing. But Reina appreciated the gesture. It wouldn't undo the past, but it acknowledged the reality of it. That night, after everyone had left and Maya was asleep, Reina updated her journal. She'd started keeping one after the trial, not for evidence, just for herself. A record of healing, of moving forward. July 18th, Maya laughed today until she got hiccups. She showed Emma her rock collection without asking permission first. She took up space without apologizing for it. This is what peace looks like. September brought school again. 3rd grade. A new teacher who knew nothing about family drama or court cases or complicated grandmother situations. Just a woman who saw Maya as a bright, capable student and treated her accordingly. Maya thrived. She made friends. She joined the school chorus. She brought home artwork that they hung on the refrigerator, layering it until the whole appliance was a collage of her creativity. October came with its burning leaves and cooling temperatures. A year since this had all started. Reina marked the anniversary, privately, noting how different everything felt now. Her phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. An unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello. Mrs. Collins? This is Margaret Henderson from Lakeside Senior Living. Reina's stomach tightened. Yes. I'm calling about Evelyn Collins. She listed you as an emergency contact. I'm afraid she had a fall yesterday and was taken to the hospital. Nothing life-threatening, but she'll need some assistance during recovery. Reina was quiet for a long moment. She thought about hospitals and emergency contacts and the assumption that family would always show up, regardless of history. I'm not her emergency contact, Reina said calmly. You'll need to call her son directly. Grant Collins. I can give you his number. Oh, I was under the impression. You were mistaken. Grant is the appropriate person to contact. She gave them Grant's work number and ended the call. That evening, she told Grant about it. He rubbed his face tiredly. I should probably visit her. That's your choice. But she hasn't apologized. Hasn't acknowledged what she did. One fall doesn't erase that. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Do you think I'm a bad son if I don't rush to help her? I think you're a good father for protecting your daughter. Grant visited his mother in the hospital 2 days later. He went alone. Reina stayed home with Maya, helping her with a science project about plant growth. When Grant returned, his expression was complicated. How is she? Reina asked. Broken wrist. Some bruising. She'll be fine. He set his keys on the counter. She asked about Maya. What did you tell her? That Maya's doing well. That we're all doing well. He met Reina's eyes. She wanted to know when she could see her. And I told her that wasn't my decision to make, that the court had ruled, and unless she could demonstrate genuine change and make amends, nothing would be different. How did she respond? She said I was being cruel, that I was punishing her for caring about my family. Grant's jaw tightened. Same narrative, same refusal to see her own role in this. Reina wasn't surprised. People didn't change just because they fell down. They didn't suddenly develop insight just because they broke a bone. Then nothing changes, she said simply. No, Grant agreed. Nothing changes. Winter returned. The wheel of seasons completing its cycle. Reina stood at the same kitchen window where she'd stood a year ago, watching Maya draw patterns in condensation. But now Maya was drawing at the table instead, working on Christmas cards for her friends. She hummed while she worked. That same tuneless melody, but it sounded different now. Confident. Content. The doorbell rang. Reina answered it to find a delivery driver with a package. She signed for it and carried the box inside. The return address was Evelyn's. Grant opened it carefully. Inside were wrapped presents labeled for Maya. A note in Evelyn's handwriting, for my granddaughter. I hope she knows I love her." Grant stared at the gifts. "What do we do with these?" Raina thought about it, about the message those gifts carried, about whether accepting them would open a door they'd worked so hard to close. "Return them," she said finally, "unopened." "That seems harsh." "It's clear. She doesn't get to buy her way back into Maya's life with presents. She doesn't get to pretend everything's fine when she's never acknowledged being wrong." Grant nodded slowly. He rewrapped the box and took it to the post office that afternoon. The gifts came back 3 days later with a note from Evelyn, bitter, accusatory, calling them cruel and unforgiving. Raina filed the note with all her other documentation, just in case, just because patterns mattered. That night, tucking Maya into bed, Raina smoothed her daughter's hair and asked, "Are you happy, sweetheart?" Maya thought about it seriously, the way children do when asked important questions. "Yeah," she said finally, "I am." "Good." Raina kissed her forehead. "That's all that matters." She left the nightlight on and closed the door partway, standing in the hallway for a moment. Down the hall, Grant was reading in their bedroom. Downstairs, the house settled into its nightly quiet, the creak of cooling wood, the hum of appliances, the sound of home. Raina thought about Evelyn's returned gifts, about the woman's inability to understand why her gestures meant nothing without accountability, about how some people spent their entire lives demanding forgiveness while never offering it. She'd stopped expecting Evelyn to change, stopped hoping for some dramatic moment of recognition or reconciliation. Those things happen in movies, not real life. Real life was quieter, harder. It was documentation and court dates and boundary setting. It was choosing to protect what mattered and accepting that some relationships couldn't be salvaged. It was ending things properly. Raina walked to her bedroom, where Grant looked up from his book and smiled at her. She climbed into bed beside him, and they read together in comfortable silence until sleep came. Outside, snow began to fall again. The neighborhood disappeared under its white blanket, all edges softened, all sharp corners smoothed. In her room, Maya slept peacefully, and Raina, for the first time in years, felt something she'd almost forgotten: complete peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she'd fought for what mattered and won. Because she'd protected her daughter from someone who couldn't see her value. Because she'd stood firm when it would have been easier to fold. She'd been pushed far enough, and she'd ended it properly. The story that began with suspicion and grew into war had finished with quiet victory, not through revenge or dramatic confrontation, but through the simple, powerful act of refusing to allow harm to continue. Some people would call it unforgiving. Raina called it love. And in the warm darkness of her home, with her family safe around her, she knew she'd made the right choice. She always had.